You have felt this before. Gone to sleep with something pressing on your chest, something unresolved and raw, and woken up to find that the same thing is still there, but it sits differently now, a little quieter, a little less sharp than it was the night before. That is not your imagination. Something happened while you slept, and the reason it happened has almost nothing to do with rest, and almost everything to do with chemistry. What most people do not know is this: the brain does not treat emotional pain the way it treats a bruise, waiting passively for time to do its work. It goes back into the wound, deliberately, every single night, and it operates on it. Not with forgetting, with something more precise than forgetting. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Tonight, the science of how your brain heals emotional wounds while you sleep will unfold, one quiet fact at a time. And somewhere in the hours ahead, the thing you carried in tonight may feel, by morning, just a little lighter than it does right now. Close your eyes and breathe. You are in exactly the right place. Let your body settle into the surface beneath you. And now we begin. You have probably felt it without having a name for it. The way a memory that made you cry at midnight can feel by morning. Like something you are simply carrying rather than something that is actively hurting you. Not healed, not gone, but different. Science calls what happens in between emotional memory processing. And what 2 decades of sleep research have uncovered is this: sleep is not a pause between your days. It is one of the most active, deliberate, and precise healing processes your brain performs every night, without exception, whether you remember it or not. The work happens inside a specific stage of sleep called REM, rapid eye movement sleep. REM is the stage most people associate with vivid dreaming, but it is far more than that. During REM, the brain enters a state unlike anything else in the 24-hour cycle. Its electrical activity looks strikingly similar to a fully awake, alert mind, which is why scientists sometimes call it paradoxical sleep. You are unconscious, and yet your brain is doing some of its most sophisticated and consequential work. A significant part of that work is emotional, not incidentally, not as a side effect, centrally. Your resting brain is anything but resting. One of the most consequential discoveries about REM sleep and emotional memory came from the laboratory of Dr. Matthew Walker at the University of California, Berkeley. His research, developed over many years of studying how humans process experience during sleep, led to a theory he calls sleep to forget, sleep to remember. The idea is that during REM sleep, the brain does 2 things at once. It preserves the content of a memory, the sequence of events, what was said, what happened, while gradually reducing the emotional charge attached to it. You keep the lesson. You begin, slowly, to lose the sting. To understand how this works, one molecule matters above all others: noradrenaline, sometimes called norepinephrine. Noradrenaline is the brain's primary stress signaling chemical. It is released during fear, anxiety, emotional distress, moments of high alert. It is the molecule that sharpens your attention when something frightening happens, that makes your heart rate climb when you receive difficult news, that gives emotional memories their searing quality. That raw and vivid quality that makes some things so hard to stop thinking about. In the waking brain, emotional memories are encoded and replayed with noradrenaline present. This is why they hurt the way they do. But during REM sleep, something remarkable changes. The brain almost completely shuts off its production of noradrenaline. This is one of the very few times in the entire 24-hour cycle when the brain can operate in something close to a noradrenaline-free state. And this changes everything for emotional healing. When the brain replays emotional memories during REM, which it does, actively and selectively, it replays them in this neurochemically calm environment. The memory is accessed and processed, but the alarm signal that normally accompanies it is absent. Over repeated sleep cycles and many nights, this gradually detaches the emotional intensity from the factual content of the memory. The wound is being worked on. Think of it this way. Imagine a fire alarm that sounds every time you open a specific drawer. Over time, you begin to dread even approaching that drawer. Not because of what is inside it, but because of the alarm. What REM sleep does, in a neurochemical sense, is allow you to open the drawer again and again, in a room where the alarm has been switched off, slowly, carefully. The brain learns that the drawer itself is not a threat. The association between the memory and the fear response begins to loosen. This is not forgetting. It is something more careful than forgetting. It is a surgical separation of fact from pain. The brain regions most active during this process include the hippocampus, which stores and retrieves memories, and the amygdala, which assigns emotional significance to experience. In waking life, when you recall a painful memory, the amygdala fires strongly. It produces that familiar, unwelcome wave of distress when you think of something that hurt you. But research using brain imaging has shown that during REM sleep, the amygdala's emotional response to those same memories begins to dampen with each successive night of sleep. The memory itself remains intact. The knowledge of what happened is preserved completely. The amygdala's alarm response, very slowly, does not. This process is not instantaneous. It unfolds across multiple nights of sleep, which is why grief does not resolve after one good night of rest. The brain is engaged in a long, patient project, returning to painful memories again and again during each REM cycle, each time processing them in the low noradrenaline state, each time loosening the emotional charge a fraction further. Researchers have found that the more REM sleep a person obtains in the nights following a traumatic or emotionally difficult event, the more the emotional intensity of the memory decreases over the following weeks. Not eliminated, softened, made more possible to carry. This is also why poor sleep following a deeply painful event can make emotional recovery measurably harder. When REM sleep is disrupted, whether by insomnia, alcohol, sleep deprivation, or certain medications, the brain loses its nightly window for emotional processing. The memories remain fully intact, but the neurochemical work of softening their charge is not completed. Some researchers believe this is one of the key mechanisms that makes trauma particularly persistent in people who also experience chronic sleep disruption. The wound is not being given the biological conditions it needs in order to heal. The surgeon keeps being interrupted before the operation can finish. So here is the first clear answer to tonight's question. A painful memory feels softer after sleep because during REM, the brain is literally running a biochemical softening process, replaying the memory in the absence of the stress hormone that makes it feel so raw, allowing the emotional charge to gradually detach from the factual content. You keep what happened. You begin, slowly and across many nights, to lose the worst of the sting. And this is only the beginning of what REM sleep reveals about the way emotional pain actually works in a brain that never stops trying to restore you to something resembling peace. The discovery that REM sleep serves this emotional processing function has shifted how many researchers now think about dreaming itself. For much of the 20th century, dreams were considered either meaningless neural noise or the territory of psychoanalytic interpretation. Contemporary sleep scientists propose a more functional view: many dreams, particularly emotionally charged ones, are the brain's way of rehearsing and reprocessing difficult emotional experiences in a safe, low-arousal context. When you dream about a conflict, a loss, a fear, your brain may not be tormenting you. It may be in the middle of its work. The dream is the processing, not the problem. The emotional content of dreams shifts across the night. Early in the night, when deep, slow-wave sleep dominates, dreams tend to be less emotionally charged. As the night progresses and REM cycles lengthen and intensify, especially in the final 2 hours of sleep, dreams become more emotionally vivid, often revisiting the themes of what has been most distressing in the days prior. The brain appears to use those late-night REM cycles as a kind of emotional workshop, processing the most charged material when the REM window is longest and deepest. This is the brain's own scheduling. It saves the hardest work for its most capable hour. This is one reason why cutting sleep short in the morning, rising earlier than your body would naturally, may carry a subtle emotional cost that most people never connect to their sleep. You are truncating the final REM cycles, which is precisely when the deepest emotional processing occurs. The brain has been building toward those late-morning REM windows all night, constructing longer and more emotionally active cycles as the night progresses. When they are interrupted, the emotional material scheduled for processing in those final cycles carries over into the day less resolved, more activated, more present. The morning you rush is sometimes the morning you feel, without knowing why, more fragile than you expected. Sleep's effect on emotion also runs in a second direction. Not only does sleep process the emotions of the day just past, it also primes the emotional brain for the day ahead. Research has shown that after a full night of sleep, including adequate REM, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational thought, emotional regulation, and perspective, maintains stronger connections to the amygdala. A well-slept brain is better equipped to regulate emotional reactions, to pause before responding in distress, to hold difficult feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Sleep is not just the healer of yesterday, it is the preparation for tomorrow. The well-slept brain and the sleep-deprived brain do not simply differ in energy level, They differ in fundamental emotional architecture. In a landmark study, participants who were kept awake for approximately 35 hours showed a 60% increase in amygdala reactivity when shown emotionally negative images, compared to those who had slept normally. The sleep-deprived brain was not merely tired. It was amplifying threat signals and simultaneously losing the prefrontal regulation that would normally dampen those signals. Sleep is not a luxury for emotional stability. For most people, it is the core infrastructure. Remove it and the whole system becomes louder, less governed, harder to live inside. There is a particular kind of emotional memory researchers have studied closely in this context: regret. Regret is unusually complex. It involves not only the memory of what happened, but a kind of mental simulation of what could have happened differently. It is forward-facing and backward-facing at once, which is why it tends to generate sustained and circular distress. Studies examining how sleep affects regret-based memories have found that sleep does not simply reduce the intensity of regret. It also appears to help the brain integrate the lessons of the regret without being trapped in its loop. Sleep moves regret from torment towards something quieter. After sleep, people recalling regret-related memories show reduced activation in the brain regions associated with raw emotional pain and increased activation in regions associated with autobiographical reflection and meaningful integration. They are still fully engaging with the memory, but the quality of that engagement has shifted from consuming distress toward more workable understanding, from the paralysis of "why did this happen" toward the quieter territory of "what does this mean? What do I carry forward?" This shift, from wound to wisdom, is one of the most meaningful things sleep quietly does for the people who let it work. One of the most tender studies in this field examined people who had recently experienced the end of a romantic relationship. Across several weeks, those who reported better sleep quality in the days following the loss showed faster reductions in emotional distress when recalling memories of their former partner. Those with disrupted sleep showed slower recovery. The researchers were careful to note that sleep does not cure grief. Grief is not a disease. But they observed clearly that sleep was one of the measurable factors that supported the brain's natural movement through grief's early heaviest stages. Sleep is not resolution. It is the condition in which resolution becomes possible. It is worth pausing here to feel what this means personally. If you are carrying something tonight, a relationship that ended, a loss you have not fully processed, a version of yourself you are still grieving, your brain already knows what to do with some of that weight. You do not have to solve it tonight. You do not have to resolve it before you allow yourself to sleep. In fact, the most useful thing you can do for the emotional work your brain needs to do is give it the conditions for deep, uninterrupted REM sleep. Your rest is your repair. This is not a metaphor. It is physiology. There is also a striking specificity to which memories get processed during REM sleep. The brain does not appear to randomly select which memories to revisit. Research using targeted memory reactivation, a technique where specific memory cues are played softly during sleep, has shown that the brain prioritizes memories that are emotionally salient, personally meaningful, and unresolved. The brain goes to what matters. It goes to what is unfinished. in a deep sense, while you sleep. Your brain is already working on the exact things you cannot stop thinking about when you are awake. The cycling thoughts of the day are the brain's way of marking the work it plans to do at night. This selectivity also has a protective dimension. The brain's prioritization of emotionally charged, unresolved memories during REM sleep means that the more something has been troubling you, the more it has been cycling through your waking mind, the more attention your sleeping brain appears to devote to processing it. For people carrying significant emotional burdens, this is not simply a comforting thought. It is a physiological reality. The very persistence of a troubling thought during waking hours may be signaling the brain to make it a priority for overnight repair. There is an intelligence operating beneath your awareness that is already on your side. The relationship between emotional processing and REM sleep has also shed light on post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the hallmarks of PTSD is disrupted REM sleep, particularly REM fragmentation, in which the REM stage is entered but repeatedly interrupted before its full cycle can complete. This prevents the full emotional processing that REM sleep is designed to accomplish. The traumatic memory keeps being accessed, but never fully processed. The wound is opened again and again without being allowed to close. This is one reason sleep therapy has become an increasingly central component of trauma treatment. Restoring healthy REM is not separate from healing trauma. It is one of its mechanisms. There is a medication called prazosin, originally developed for blood pressure, that has shown effectiveness in treating the nightmares of PTSD. Researchers discovered that part of its mechanism is precisely the reduction of noradrenaline activity in the brain during sleep, which allows REM sleep to proceed without the heightened stress signaling that fragments it. In other words, the medication works partly by recreating, pharmacologically, what healthy REM sleep creates naturally: a low noradrenaline environment in which emotional memories can be processed without the alarm system firing. The medication points back to the same mechanism that makes sleep itself one of the most sophisticated forms of emotional care the brain can offer. Many researchers have also studied what they call affective memory consolidation, the way the emotional significance of a memory is consolidated alongside its factual content. One consistent finding is that sleep does not simply reduce the charge of negative memories. It also appears to strengthen the positive and meaningful dimensions of emotional experience. Memories of connection, love, achievement, and belonging may be consolidated during the same REM processes that soften pain. Meaning sleep may be simultaneously healing your wounds and deepening your most cherished experiences. The same chemistry that takes the sting from grief may be the chemistry that makes joy more lasting. 25 facts in, and a pattern has emerged that changes the way the question sounds. We asked why a painful memory feels softer after sleep. But what the science reveals is that the softer feeling is not a side effect of rest. It is the output of a deliberate, chemically precise, selectively targeted operation that your brain performs every night on the most unresolved emotional material you carry. This tells us something not just about REM sleep. It tells us something about the nature of pain itself. Pain is not fixed. The charge attached to it is not permanent. And the mechanism for loosening that charge has been running every night of your life. The next arc begins with what happens when it cannot. Let's rest here for a moment. Right now, in this quiet. Your brain is continuing something it has been doing your whole life, returning to the things that have not been finished, the worries that waited at the edge of sleep, the memories that arrived uninvited, the ache that does not have a name yet. It does not need your help. It does not need your direction or your understanding. It only needs what you are doing right now. Feel the weight of your body. Let your shoulders release completely. Let your hands become heavy. The work of tonight is already in motion. Not all emotional memories are processed equally during sleep. Research has found that memories with strong social and relational content, what someone said to you, the expression on a face during a moment of conflict or tenderness, are among the most actively processed during REM. This makes evolutionary sense. The social world is the primary source of both our greatest wounds and our deepest needs. The brain appears to understand this, devoting particular attention during sleep to the emotional material that governs how we relate to one another. The things that hurt you most are often the things your sleeping brain returns to most reliably. There is also evidence that the first night after an emotionally significant event carries particular weight. The brain's REM sleep on the very first night following a loss, a conflict, or a frightening experience is already mobilized to begin processing it. Sleep researchers often emphasize this finding because it runs counter to the common instinct to push through the early days without giving rest its proper place. The first night matters most. Prioritizing sleep immediately after something hard has happened, not several days later, may be one of the most biologically significant things a person can do in the early hours of grief. Sleep architecture matters as much as sleep duration. Sleep architecture refers to the pattern of sleep stages across a full night. How much time is spent in light sleep, deep slow wave sleep, and REM, and in what sequence. A healthy architecture produces a natural progression in which REM periods lengthen across the night, with the longest and most emotionally active REM phases occurring in the final third. This is why 7 to 9 hours of sleep, not simply 7 hours of fragmented or light sleep, tends to produce the most robust emotional processing. Duration without architecture is not the same thing as genuine restorative sleep. What happens in the hours before sleep also influences the quality of emotional processing during the night. Studies have examined how exposure to emotionally activating content, distressing news, difficult conversations, rereading painful messages, in the hour before sleep affects the brain's subsequent overnight work. What the research suggests is that the brain enters REM carrying the emotional residue of the final waking hours. Calm. Low arousal activity before sleep creates better conditions for overnight emotional processing. Not because calm activities resolve anything, but because they allow the brain to enter REM from a less activated baseline. The hour before sleep is part of the healing too. There is a striking parallel between the emotional healing function of REM sleep and certain forms of therapy. Approaches designed to reduce the emotional charge of traumatic memories, including EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing, and certain forms of exposure therapy, work by reactivating the memory in a context of relative safety, allowing new, less distressing associations to form. The neurological mechanism bears a strong resemblance to what REM sleep does naturally, replaying the memory in a low-stress neurochemical environment. allowing the emotional response to gradually decouple from the content. Sleep may be the most ancient form of this kind of therapy, billions of years older than any clinical approach. The brain's use of REM sleep for emotional processing also appears to connect to its capacity for empathy. Some researchers have proposed that the social and emotional memories processed during REM help calibrate the brain's internal models of other people. Its representations of how other minds work, what others feel, and what social interactions mean. In this view, sleep is not only healing your own emotional wounds, it may also be maintaining your ability to understand and respond to the wounds of others. The sleeping brain is tending not only to your inner world, but to your capacity for connection within the world beyond it. There is a dimension of emotional processing during sleep rarely discussed but appearing regularly in the research: the role of dreams in rehearsing feared or dreaded scenarios. When people dream about something they are afraid of, losing someone, failing at something that matters, being abandoned, those dreams are often distressing in the moment. But studies examining emotional memory over time have found that dreaming about feared events may reduce waking fear associated with them. The brain, running its own form of exposure therapy during dreams, may be quietly lowering the threshold of your waking fears while you sleep. The nightmare is sometimes the cure. Researchers studying grief specifically have made a particularly interesting observation. In the acute phase of grief, the weeks immediately following a loss, the people who showed the most emotional adaptation over time were often those who reported dreaming about the person they had lost. These dreams were not always comforting. Sometimes they were painful, filled with longing or the reality of absence. But the brain's act of incorporating the loss into the dream world appeared to be part of how it was integrating the loss into the waking self. The dreaming brain was doing the work of saying goodbye, in its own wordless, unhurried language. There is also a counterintuitive finding in the sleep and emotional memory literature. REM sleep appears to strengthen the emotional intensity of positive memories, even as it softens the intensity of negative ones. The same processes that are reducing your pain may also be deepening your joy. Memories of closeness, beauty, and meaning appear to be consolidated with particular vividness during REM sleep. The brain is not simply lowering the emotional volume on everything. It is calibrating, turning down the alarm and turning up the resonance of what matters most. This asymmetry is not an accident. It reflects a system designed for more than survival. One of the most illuminating experiments in this field had participants view a series of images, some neutral, some emotionally positive, some negative, either in the morning with a day of wakefulness before testing, or in the evening with a full night of sleep before testing. Those who slept before the memory test showed significantly better recall of emotionally significant images in both categories. But the key difference was in tone. Those who had slept recalled the negative images with less distress, and the positive images with more warmth. Sleep had selectively recalibrated the emotional quality of memory. The same events, the same facts, held differently after sleep. Sleep also speaks to the experience of regret in a specific way. Regret involves mental time travel, returning to a past decision and imagining alternatives. And it is one of the most energy-consuming emotional states the brain inhabits. Research suggests that adequate sleep not only reduces the pain of regret over time, but shifts the quality of the experience itself. from rumination, where the mind circles without resolution, toward reflection, where the past can be held with something like perspective. Sleep is one of the few things that can move regret from a loop into a lesson. It does not undo what happened. It changes what can be done with it. There is a particular hormone associated with both sleep and emotional bonding worth knowing: oxytocin, often called the connection hormone. Oxytocin is released during moments of closeness and trust. Researchers found that oxytocin activity follows patterns linked to sleep cycles, with REM sleep associated with shifts in its release. Some researchers have proposed that part of what the dreaming brain is doing during REM involves processing the emotional significance of our closest relationships, our bonds of love and attachment, in ways that maintain and reinforce those connections, even during the hours of separation that sleep represents. Your sleeping brain may be tending quietly to the people you love. The link between emotional processing and sleep quality creates what might be called a healing feedback loop. Good sleep facilitates emotional regulation during waking hours, which in turn makes it easier to sleep well, because a well-regulated emotional state produces lower physiological arousal at bedtime. Conversely, poor sleep increases emotional reactivity, which makes it harder to regulate the arousal that prevents sleep. This is why sleep disruption and emotional distress are so often found together, and why improving sleep and addressing emotional health are most effective when pursued in parallel. They are not separate problems. They are the same system, moving in the same direction. Many people who experience chronic emotional pain, ongoing grief, persistent anxiety, the slow accumulation of unprocessed hurt, report that their sleep feels lighter and less restorative, even when they lie down for adequate hours. Research suggests this is not coincidental. Chronic emotional distress elevates baseline levels of stress hormones, including the very noradrenaline that REM sleep works to lower. If noradrenaline is elevated going into sleep, the neurochemical conditions for deep emotional processing during REM are compromised from the start. This creates a situation in which the people who most need the healing that sleep provides are the ones whose emotional state most interferes with getting it. 40 facts in. The science is painting a picture of extraordinary subtlety and intelligence. Your brain is not simply pausing during sleep. It is engaged in a highly specific, chemically precise, emotionally targeted process, moving through the residue of your days, selecting what is unresolved, replaying it in a state of neurochemical calm, gradually softening the charge of your most painful memories while deepening your most meaningful ones. Every night, whether you remember it or not. This is happening. In the hours ahead, as you drift deeper, that work continues. Take a slow breath. The room is quiet now. Your body has been doing this, letting go. Every night for your entire life. The breath coming in, the breath going out. Your brain knows what it is doing. You can let it. One of the most useful things to understand about emotional healing during sleep is that it is not something you can force. The brain's REM-based emotional processing operates on its own timeline, anchored to the biological architecture of the sleep cycle. You cannot process a painful memory more quickly by trying harder during sleep. What you can do is give the process its best conditions. Consistent sleep timing, a calm pre-sleep environment, reduced alcohol and stimulants, and a willingness to allow sleep to come without fighting it. The brain asks very little. Mostly, it asks to be allowed to work without interruption. Sleep-focused interventions. Things as simple as a consistent sleep schedule, reduced nighttime phone use, a cooler and darker sleep environment can measurably improve REM sleep quality. And with it, the pace and quality of emotional memory processing. These are not forceful interventions. They are quiet ones. But the science suggests they work precisely because they restore the conditions under which the brain's own healing intelligence can operate most fully. The tools for emotional healing are not always in the therapy room. Sometimes they are in the hour before bed. The intersection of sleep and emotional memory also clarifies something about the relationship between rumination and rest. Rumination, the repetitive, unresolved cycling of painful thoughts, is one of the most common features of emotional distress. Many people find that the hours before sleep are when rumination is most intense, because the distractions of the day have faded and there is nothing left to redirect attention away from what hurts. This is not a flaw. The brain, in its preparatory state before sleep, may be surfacing unresolved emotional material precisely because sleep is about to process it. The rumination that feels like torment may in part be the loading dock for overnight repair. Sleep also has something to say about forgiveness. Forgiveness, in psychological terms, is not the erasure of what happened or the condoning of what was done. It is the gradual decoupling of emotional charge from the memory of an injury. It is the ability to recall what someone did without the full force of the original pain arriving every time. Research suggests that this decoupling follows a neurological pathway very similar to what REM sleep facilitates when processing painful memories. In a real sense, sleep may be one of the unconscious mechanisms of forgiveness. Your brain may be forgiving on your behalf, quietly, while you rest. There is a key clarification in the research that is worth holding clearly. Sleep does not erase pain. It does not make difficult experiences vanish. It does not replace the need for connection, support, or time. What it does is provide the neurological substrate on which emotional processing can occur. A person who sleeps well but is isolated, unsupported, or in an environment of ongoing harm will not heal through sleep alone. Sleep is a condition of healing, necessary, and often the most chronically undervalued one. But not the whole of it. The surgeon needs an operating room. Sleep is the operating room. Sleep deprivation does not only feel like tiredness in the body, it produces a specific kind of emotional rawness, a lowering of the threshold at which things feel overwhelming, a reduction in the capacity to hold difficulty with perspective, a tendency for small setbacks to feel disproportionately large. This is not weakness. It is the documented neurological consequence of insufficient REM sleep, operating on the prefrontal amygdala connection that governs emotional regulation. Fatigue and fragility are not separate problems. They share a root, and that root is addressable in a way that most people have not been told is possible. Recent research has moved from examining how sleep processes the content of specific memories to exploring how sleep affects the brain's more general emotional orientation. This work suggests that consistent, high-quality sleep is associated with a more stable baseline emotional state, lower general anxiety, greater capacity for positive emotion, less reactivity to minor stressors. Sleep does not only heal specific wounds, it maintains the psychological soil in which resilience grows. It is both the surgeon and the gardener of your emotional life, tending not only to the injuries but to the underlying capacity to recover from them. There is also a developing body of research on how the narrative content of dreams, not just the neural activity, but the stories the dreaming brain tells, contributes to emotional processing. Work by researcher Rosalind Cartwright, examining the dreams of people going through divorce, found that those who dreamed more frequently about their former partner, particularly in dreams that included other people and emotionally complex scenarios, showed better psychological recovery over the following year. The dreams were not simply replaying the pain, they were integrating it into a broader emotional context. The dreaming brain is, among other things, a storyteller working to make sense of what has been broken. The metaphor that emerges from this research is one of the most comforting available in all of neuroscience. Your brain, during sleep, behaves something like a very patient caretaker of your inner life. It does not dismiss your pain. It does not ignore it or suppress it. It returns to it, again and again, in the quiet of the night, in a state of chemical calm, holding it, processing it, slowly and carefully reducing its sharpness. It does this without your awareness, without your instruction, without any effort on your part. All it asks is that you give it the conditions to work. All it needs is your rest. We have reached the midpoint of tonight's journey. The answer to our central question has been forming across these 50 facts. A memory hurts because it is encoded with the neurochemical signature of pain. It feels softer after sleep because REM sleep replays it in the one state where that signature can be gradually dissolved. But here is the question the second half follows: if this mechanism exists, if the brain already knows how to heal, why do some wounds persist for years? Why do some people wake up carrying everything they went to sleep with, unchanged? That is the question that deepens everything we have covered, so rest here for a moment. There is something worth understanding about the memory that still has weight in you right now. Every time you recall it, every time it surfaces, unbidden, in the middle of an ordinary day, your brain is not tormenting you. It is returning to unfinished work. And right now, in this stillness, in this breath, in this quiet room, the conditions for that work are forming. Let your body go heavier now. Let your jaw soften completely. The work you cannot do consciously, your brain is already doing. The brain does not store memories like photographs, fixed, unchanged each time they are viewed. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you recall an experience, you are not playing back a recording. You are rebuilding the memory from neural fragments. And in the rebuilding, the memory is subtly modified. Sleep appears to influence what is emphasized, what is softened, and what connections are formed during this reconstruction. Across nights of sleep, the same memory is slowly retold in a way that for most people, gradually becomes more integrated and less raw. This reconstructive nature of memory has a meaningful implication for emotional healing, because memories are rebuilt each time they are accessed. And because REM sleep influences the neurochemical context of that rebuilding, the brain has a natural mechanism for gradually revising the emotional quality of painful memories over time. This is not distortion or false memory. It is the ordinary updating that the brain performs on all significant memories as it integrates them into the broader story of a person's life. Sleep is one of the key biological settings in which this integration occurs. Research examining the relationship between sleep and meaning-making, the process by which people find understanding in difficult experiences, has found that people who sleep well following a significant loss show greater growth in their capacity to make meaning of the experience over subsequent months, compared to those who sleep poorly. Sleep supports not only the reduction of emotional pain, but the construction of the frameworks through which people come to understand what happened to them. Healing is not only the softening of pain, it is also the finding of meaning. Sleep appears to help with both, quietly and at the same time. The brain's emotional processing during sleep is not limited to recent experiences. Older memories, wounds from years or decades past, also appear to undergo ongoing processing during REM sleep, particularly when something in current life carries similar emotional resonance. This is why certain life transitions can reactivate grief from earlier periods. The brain is not revisiting old pain indiscriminately, but recognizing when present circumstances carry similar emotional signatures and using the opportunity to process material that was perhaps never fully resolved. Sleep, in this sense, is part of a lifelong healing project. Old wounds are not forgotten. They are still being worked on. The research has also shed light on a particular experience many people have had, but rarely named: waking from a dream that leaves a strong emotional residue. You may have woken from a dream about someone who is gone, or a time that has passed, and found yourself flooded with a feeling: sadness, longing, love, that was unexpected in its intensity. This is not your brain malfunctioning. It is, in all likelihood, your brain completing a cycle of processing that your waking awareness intercepts in progress. The feeling is real because the work is real. Something in you was being gently mended, and you happened to wake up mid-repair. One of the most consistent findings in the sleep and emotion literature is the relationship between REM sleep and anxiety. Anxiety at its neurological root involves an amygdala calibrated to perceive threat. REM sleep, with its noradrenaline suppression, recalibrates this system. People who consistently get adequate, good quality REM sleep show measurably lower baseline anxiety than those who sleep poorly. Even when other factors are controlled, the mechanism is the same. In the absence of noradrenaline, the brain can rehearse emotional material, including feared scenarios, without reinforcing the fear response. Sleep is, in a neurological sense, one of the most natural and available forms of anxiety relief. There is a parallel in the research between the effects of REM sleep deprivation and the effects of emotional trauma. In both states, there is heightened amygdala reactivity, reduced prefrontal regulation, disrupted noradrenaline balance, and impaired emotional memory processing. This parallel has led some researchers to propose that one of the mechanisms through which trauma perpetuates itself is precisely the disruption of REM sleep, which removes the brain's primary tool for processing the trauma's emotional charge. Restoring healthy sleep is not a separate goal from healing trauma. In many cases, it is a precondition for the deeper healing to occur. The brain cannot heal a wound it is not being allowed to reach. Sleep's role in emotional healing intersects with the old idea that time heals all wounds. The research suggests time alone does not heal. What heals is what the brain does with time during sleep. Without adequate sleep, time passes, but the processing does not occur. With sleep, the accumulation of nights becomes the accumulation of healing, each night contributing a small reduction in emotional charge, each morning bringing a version of a memory that is, by a fraction, more possible to carry than it was the night before. Time is the container. Sleep is what fills it with repair. There is a quiet dignity in knowing that your sleeping brain is attending to your inner life with this level of precision and care. Many people who are struggling emotionally feel that nothing is happening, that they are simply waiting or stuck. The science suggests otherwise. Every night of sleep, even restless sleep, even imperfect sleep, is contributing to the brain's ongoing project of emotional integration. The work may be invisible, the progress may feel imperceptible, but it is occurring. You are not simply waiting for healing. You are, through the very act of sleep, participating in it. The brain's overnight emotional processing also appears to influence how we relate to ourselves. Self-criticism, particularly the kind that cycles through memories of perceived failures, shares neurological characteristics with the rumination patterns seen in depression and anxiety. Research examining how sleep affects self-related emotional processing suggests that adequate REM sleep may help moderate self-harsh thinking, not by changing the facts of what happened, but by reducing the emotional charge attached to memories of failure. You may wake up less harsh with yourself, not because the night brought clarity, but because sleep brought the chemistry that makes a little more gentleness possible. Research suggests gender may influence aspects of emotional memory processing during sleep, with some studies finding differences in the intensity or pattern of emotional consolidation between men and women in certain contexts. These differences are not absolute, and the research is ongoing, but they suggest that the relationship between sleep and emotional healing may not be identical across all people, that the specific emotional content a person carries, the adequacy of their REM sleep, and the particular architecture of their nights all contribute to how this process unfolds for them individually. The healing is universal. The path is personal. One of the more unexpected findings in this field concerns the relationship between dreaming about a problem and waking insight. Research has found that people who slept on a challenging problem were more likely to discover a hidden solution than those who remained awake. The brain's overnight processing is not limited to emotional material. It works on intellectual problems as well, rearranging elements, finding new connections, discovering solutions invisible from the waking state. The idea of sleeping on it is neurologically sound. The sleeping brain is not less engaged than the waking brain. It is differently engaged. Freed from the constraints of ordinary thought, The emotional intelligence of the sleeping brain has also been connected to creativity. Many artists, writers, and scientists have described waking with a solution, a melody, or an image unavailable the night before. The neurological explanation involves the same REM stage loosening of ordinary waking constraints, the freer association of ideas, the ability to make connections across normally separate domains that characterizes emotional processing during sleep. The brain in REM is more flexible, more willing to see sideways. This is not coincidence. The same chemistry that softens pain also opens the mind. The relationship between sleep and emotional resilience, the capacity to recover from adversity, has emerged as one of the more consistent findings in this area. Resilience is not a fixed trait. It is a dynamic capacity that varies across conditions. And one of the conditions that most reliably supports resilience is consistent, adequate sleep. Studies examining resilience in high-stress populations, healthcare workers, caregivers, people experiencing chronic life difficulties, have consistently found that sleep quality is one of the strongest predictors of resilience levels over time. The people who recover most readily from hardship are, disproportionately, the people who sleep well. Sleep does not give you strength. It restores your access to the strength you already have. 3/4 of the way through tonight's journey, the central question, why does a painful memory feel softer after sleep, has been answered in full, from neurotransmitters to narrative, from the amygdala to the story. Sleep heals emotional wounds because it provides the only biological environment in which emotional memory can be processed without the full weight of the stress chemistry that made it painful. This is not incidental to sleep. This is one of sleep's primary purposes. The big idea, the thing you will carry from tonight, is already forming the brain's capacity to heal pain is not a mystery, and it does not require anything from you except your rest. There is a dimension of the research that touches on something deeply human, the relationship between sleep and hope. Studies examining sleep quality and psychological well-being consistently find that adequate sleep is associated with more positive future orientation. The sense that tomorrow will be at least a little better, that the difficulty of today is not permanent. This is not simply a mood effect of feeling rested. It appears to reflect a genuine neurological shift. A brain that has completed its overnight emotional processing is, in a measurable sense, better calibrated to perceive possibility. The well-slept brain sees more doors. The implications of this research for how we think about mental health are quiet but significant. Depression, anxiety, grief, and trauma all have documented relationships with sleep disruption. For a long time, this relationship was understood primarily in one direction. Emotional pain causes poor sleep. What the research we have been covering tonight suggests is that the relationship is bidirectional and perhaps more symmetrical than previously recognized. Poor sleep, by disrupting REM-based emotional processing, also maintains and deepens emotional pain. Treating sleep is, in part, treating the brain's capacity to heal itself. It does not replace other care. It makes other care more possible. Research at UC Berkeley found a striking connection between sleep and social experience. Sleep-deprived individuals not only felt lonelier themselves but generated feelings of social aversion in others. People who interacted with sleep-deprived individuals reported feeling less inclined to engage with them socially. Sleep deprivation appears to produce a social withdrawal signature that operates both inwardly and outwardly. Conversely, adequate sleep supports the capacity for warmth, connection, and reciprocity that makes relationships sustaining. Sleep is not only personal, it is relational. How well you sleep shapes how available you are to the people who need you. One of the most tender observations in this research concerns how the sleeping brain treats memories of people who have been lost. Grief research finds that in the period following bereavement, dreams about the deceased are common, and that these dreams, though often painful in the moment, tend to shift over time toward more peaceful and integrated emotional content. The desperate dreams of early grief gradually give way to dreams in which the person is simply present, not threatening, not gone in the painful sense, but held in a way that feels complete. The sleeping brain finds its own way to say goodbye. It takes the time that it needs. Sleep touches the experience of shame, one of the most painful and isolating of human emotions. Shame involves a deeply negative self-evaluation, often accompanied by a desire to hide. Research suggests that adequate REM sleep reduces the intensity of shame-based memories over time, not by eliminating the evaluation, but by reducing the visceral physical distress that accompanies the recall. People often describe feeling a shameful memory as less physically overwhelming after sleep, even when the content of the memory is unchanged. Sleep softens the body's response to shame, even when the mind still holds what happened. This is not forgetting. It is bearability. Emotional processing during sleep also applies to anger. The phrase, "sleep on it," before responding turns out to have neurological support. Emotional memories, including anger-related ones, are processed during sleep in ways that reduce their acute intensity without diminishing the underlying values driving the anger. A person who is angry about an injustice does not wake up having forgotten the injustice, but may wake up better able to think clearly about how to respond. Sleep does not dim your values. It reduces the physiological noise that can distort their expression. What you feel when you are rested is often closer to what you actually believe. As we move through the later facts of tonight's journey, the scientific picture becomes something more personal. We began with neurochemistry and arrived here. Your pain is not permanent. The weight of what you carry is not fixed. Every night of sleep is a contribution to the brain's ongoing project of integration. Not erasure, not forgetting, but the slow, intelligent, chemically precise process of returning you to something more like peace. This does not happen in one night. It does not happen without difficulty, but it is happening right now, as you breathe and rest and allow yourself to be still. It is happening. Matthew Walker describes REM sleep's emotional function as overnight therapy, a nightly session in which the most painful material of your life is held, examined, and gently processed in the safest neurochemical environment your brain can create. Unlike waking therapy, it requires no words, no insight, no deliberate effort. It asks only one thing: that you allow yourself to sleep. In that allowing, your brain becomes the most caring and capable therapist you have ever had access to. And it works entirely on your behalf, every night of your life, asking nothing in return but the dark and the stillness. There are people for whom this knowledge may feel bittersweet, people who have told themselves they should be over something by now, that their continued pain is evidence of weakness or failure. The science offers a different view. Healing is a biological process, not a moral achievement. It operates on its own timeline, determined not by how much you want to heal or how hard you try, but by the neurological conditions of your sleep. Patience with your own healing is not resignation. It is an accurate understanding of how healing actually works. You are not behind. You are in the process. 3/4 of the way through tonight's journey. Here is the big idea stated fully. For the first time, the pain attached to emotional memory is not a permanent feature of the memory itself. It is a neurochemical signature added at encoding and gradually dissolved during REM sleep, which is the only time the brain can access those memories in the absence of the stress hormone that makes them hurt. Healing from emotional wounds is not something you achieve. It is something your brain does. Every night, in the conditions of genuine rest, the remaining facts carry a different quality. They are not building toward the answer. They are the answer. Settling in. Notice this moment. Every night of your life. This process has been occurring long before you knew the science of it. Every morning you woke up and something felt, perhaps only slightly, less sharp than the night before. That was this. That was your brain, returning to the same wounds, in the same gentle dark, each time contributing its small reduction in what is still unfinished. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to understand it fully for it to work. It has always been working. Let your breathing deepen now. Let your body settle completely. This is the oldest kindness your brain knows how to offer. Every night you sleep, your brain chooses something to return to. It is not random. It is the most unfinished thing. The memory that still has edges. The wound that still carries charge. And it goes there. Quietly, chemically, in the dark, and begins again, not to torment, to tend. There is no more precise act of care in all of biology than the brain returning, every night, to your pain. Sleep is an act of trust. You let go of the control you maintain while waking. You allow the brain to take over, and what the brain does with that trust, what it does in the hours you give it, is this: it uses the biochemical conditions of REM to hold your most painful experiences and, slowly, make them a little more possible to carry every night. Without exception, without your help. There is no rush in the sleeping brain. It works at its own pace, in its own chemistry, across its own timeline. This is why healing cannot be forced. The brain's overnight work is not responsive to urgency. It requires the slow, unhurried conditions of genuine rest. The harder you try to sleep away a grief, the more you interfere with the conditions that allow grief to be processed. Rest is not effort. Rest is the surrender that makes the effort possible. Every REM cycle is a small act of maintenance. An hour here, 90 minutes there, across the arc of a full night. none of them spectacular, all of them necessary. The brain does not heal in single visible moments. It heals in accumulations, the quiet addition of nights, each one returning to the same material, each contributing its small reduction in what has been most painful. This is how all deep things change slowly, invisibly, through repetition that does not announce itself. The sleeping brain does not distinguish between the pain you carried in tonight and the pain you have been carrying for years. It works on both. It returns to the grief from this morning and the wound from a decade ago. Sometimes in the same REM cycle. This is how old pain can feel unexpectedly present in a dream. Not because the brain is cruel, but because the brain is thorough. It tends to what has not yet been finished. It does not forget what still needs care. You carry more than you think you do. Everyone does. The accumulation of small hurts, of words said and not said, of losses that were never named as losses. The brain carries all of this too, and every night, in the quiet hours of REM, it works on the inventory, sorting, softening, integrating. You may not know what it worked on, but you may notice, in the weeks ahead, that certain things feel lighter. That is this. That is the accumulation of nights doing what nights do. The language of healing tends to favor large gestures, breakthroughs, revelations. The moment everything changed. The science of sleep suggests a different grammar. Healing, in the neurological sense, is written in the small and the repetitive. A few micrograms of noradrenaline suppressed, a slightly reduced amygdala response to a memory, a fraction more integration between feeling and understanding, not visible, not sudden, entirely real, written in the accumulated nights of your life. There is a kind of peace available in this knowledge, not the peace of resolution, not the peace that comes from having solved what is painful, but the peace of knowing that something intelligent and caring is already at work, that you are not simply waiting, that the nights are not wasted, that even the sleep you do not remember is contributing to the slow, ongoing project of your healing. This is not comfort at the expense of truth. It is comfort that comes from truth. The brain knows how to heal. This is not a belief. It is the conclusion of decades of neuroscience, sleep research, and clinical observation. The mechanisms are real. The neurochemistry is documented. The outcomes are measurable. The condition for accessing all of this is remarkably simple. Let yourself sleep. Not perfectly, not completely, just enough, and as regularly as you can. The brain asks very little in exchange for what it offers. It asks for the dark, and the stillness, and your willingness to let go. Tonight, you are in exactly the right place. Whether you intended to find rest, or simply found yourself here, this is the right thing. The body softening, the breath slowing, the mind beginning, at its own pace, to loosen its hold on the day. And in this loosening, the conditions forming, the chemistry preparing, the brain, patient as it has always been, beginning to do what it has always done, beginning to tend to what you carry, beginning, again, to mend. Sleep is the only state in which the brain turns off the alarm. Every waking moment, Stress chemistry is present. The vigilance that keeps you functional. Only in REM does the brain allow itself to exist. Temporarily. Beyond that alarm, this is why sleep after a long and difficult day can feel like such relief. You are not only resting the body, you are, for a few hours, allowing the alarm system to stand down. There is rest in that which no waking state can replicate. When we understand what sleep does for our emotional lives, going to bed becomes something different. Not simply the end of a day, but a threshold, a nightly passage into the one state in which your brain can do the work that waking life does not allow. Every time you close your eyes, you are entering a space where the most intelligent healing process available to you can unfold. What you bring to that threshold, the brain receives without judgment and tends to without ceasing. The painful memories do not disappear. They are not supposed to. The lesson, the meaning, the record of what happened, these are preserved. What changes across nights of sleep is the relationship between you and the memory, the degree to which it pulls you back into the original pain. Sleep does not erase, it adjusts. It shifts the memory from something that happens to you each time you recall it, toward something you simply know, clearly, honestly, and with a little more peace around it. There is a word for what the brain moves toward across months of processing a significant wound: integration. Not resolution, integration. The wound becomes part of the whole, neither ignored nor dominant. You can hold it alongside everything else. The joy, the love, the ordinary days, without it consuming your attention. Sleep is one of the primary mechanisms by which integration occurs. The integrated self is the self given conditions to carry suffering without being defined by it. So the central question of tonight is answered. A memory hurts yesterday and feels softer today because your brain spent part of last night in the quiet chemistry of REM sleep, separating the pain signal from the memory itself. Not completely, not permanently in a single night, but incrementally, consistently, faithfully. This is one of the most purposeful things your brain does. It is what you are built for, and it is what is happening right now. As you breathe and rest and allow the night to continue, healing is not linear. Some nights, the brain processes more. Some nights, less. Some weeks feel like progress. Some feel like returning to a place you thought you had left. This is not failure. It is the nature of the process. The brain does not follow a straight line. It spirals, returning to the same material from a slightly different position each time, adding each small increment to all the ones that came before. The spiral is the path. You are always further along than you think. You do not have to be brave to heal. You do not have to be strong, or stoic, or ready. You only have to be here, lying down in the dark, breathing, allowing the hours to pass. The brain does the brave work. It goes to the places you cannot bring yourself to go consciously. It holds what you cannot hold deliberately. It returns to what you have had to look away from. You provide the rest. It provides the rest of the repair. The research returns, at its deepest level, to something very simple. Sleep is the brain caring for itself, and by extension, caring for you, not passively, not incidentally, with the most sophisticated emotional intelligence it possesses, deployed in the only conditions in which it can fully operate. When you sleep, you are not simply recovering from the day. You are being cared for. There is a tenderness in the biology that the language of science does not always capture. But that is real nonetheless. Some people find it difficult to allow themselves the rest they need, carrying a belief, cultural or deeply personal, that rest has to be earned. The research tonight offers a different understanding. Rest is not earned. It is required, not as indulgence, but as the precondition for the brain's most vital functions. You do not have to earn the right to be tended to. The brain is simply waiting for your permission. It has been waiting, patiently, every night. Let this rest with you as we close. Whatever you brought here tonight, whatever you are carrying that is heavy, the brain already knows what to do with some of it. Not all, perhaps not most, in a single night, but some, and across nights and weeks, it will continue, patient as breath, steady as the dark, always returning, always tending, always working, quietly, on your behalf. What the research shows us, finally, is not a trick or a technique. It is a fact about your nature. You are a being with a brain designed to heal, not despite what you have been through, but because of what you carry. The healing does not wait for you to be ready. It does not require your belief or your effort. It requires only the conditions you are creating right now. The brain that is processing your pain tonight is the same brain that has been doing so every night of your life. Before you understood the science of it, before you had words for what you were carrying, it has been there in every night you gave it, working, tending, returning. This is not new. This is something you have been receiving all along, without knowing it was being given. Sleep does not ask you to be okay. It does not ask you to have resolved anything, processed anything, understood anything. It only asks that you lie down, that you allow the dark, that you let the hours pass. Whatever state you arrive in, whatever weight, whatever grief, whatever the shape of what is unfinished, the brain receives all of it, without judgment, and begins its work. In the morning, something will feel slightly different, not solved, not finished, but different. The way a room feels after someone has spent the night quietly tidying it while you slept. You may not see what was moved. You may not know what was sorted, but the quality of the air will be changed. That is this. That is what tonight has been doing, and what every night before this one has been doing, all the way back to the beginning. The answer is not that sleep is remarkable. The answer is that you are a brain that carries this much and still returns every night to tend to it. A body that holds pain this faithfully and still knows how to let go a little in the dark. The healing is not something that happens to you. It is something you are already in the act of becoming. And it happens in the same place it has always happened, in the quiet, in the dark, in the hours that belong only to this. Close your eyes now, if they are not already closed. Feel the weight of everything you carried in tonight resting alongside you now. in the chemistry of this moment, in this breath, in this dark, in this body that has been through everything you have been through. The signal that makes the sharpest memories sharp is beginning, very slightly, to loosen. Not gone, not erased, just held. In a brain that knows how to do this, in a body that has always known. Let yourself go now. Let the night take what it came for. We began tonight asking why something that hurt yesterday can feel lighter after sleep. And the answer we found was not about forgetting. It was about chemistry. A precise and deliberate process that your brain performs in the only neurochemical environment where emotional pain can be safely held and slowly released. But the thing worth carrying from tonight is not the science. It is what the science confirms, that you were built for this, that the brain you carry, the one that has been through everything you have been through, has been working on your behalf every single night of your life. Not perfectly, not always enough, but faithfully, without ceasing, without needing you to understand it first. The grief you have been carrying, the regret you cannot put down, the wound that still has edges, your brain has been returning to all of it, in the dark, while you slept, and it will return to it tonight, and the night after. This is not comfort in spite of the difficulty. This is comfort because of the biology, because of what you actually are. Subconscious mind reprogramming has been returning, across many hours, to the question of what happens inside you while you are not watching. The next hour follows what the brain continues to rewrite. In sleep, in silence, in ways that surface slowly as days pass. That hour is waiting whenever you are ready. Let the processing that began tonight continue now. The way a conversation does not end when the voices go quiet, but keeps moving somewhere underneath. Let your body breathe at its own pace. Let your hands be completely still. Sleep carries you to the part of the night where the sharpest things become softer. Not because you made them softer, but because you stopped holding them so tightly. But if your eyes are already closed, stay there. Rest well, quiet one. You have been carrying this longer than you needed to carry it alone. Your brain has been there all along, where science becomes the softest place to rest. Good night.